10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. It's Lori with the Capital Film Arts Alliance and another episode of CFAA Film Talk, where we bring you some of the best and brightest talent that is in our production world and in the Northern California region. We are really happy to bring you a topic tonight that I think is real important, and that's women in film production. We want to show, first and foremost, that number is growing, and the skills and the opportunities for women and what they've had to do to progress in their careers is something we're going to talk about in a few minutes with our guests. I just want to check with you really quick and see if this is your first time on one of our webcasts or first time seeing something from the Capital Film Arts Alliance. We're a nonprofit film association that was formed in the Sacramento region about 15 years ago. I was just looking at information that I found in a drawer because I was cleaning because, COVID. Anyway, I found a drawer that had the documents of when we initially created the CFAA, what our mission and vision was, what our bank account looked like, and the amount of information or amount of people that we had that were involved. And it just makes me so proud. I think we went from $36.45 in the bank account and a couple dozen people on the Excel spreadsheet to now having a database over 5,000 people. And up until COVID, we had weekly physical meetings for writers, actors, and filmmakers. So we're bringing that kind of all together in this webcast and the opportunity to keep everybody connected and to give you a chance to still meet the guests that we think are important to driving production and doing something really positive with this industry here. So with that being said, we don't charge anything for our webcast. As you can see, you stumbled on it and there's no coin slot. But we do have a donate button on our website, and anybody who can donate at this time, all of the money that we raise goes directly back to the organization and to the people. No one gets paid. This is all volunteer, but what we want to do is find ways to add to what we're offering our members in all the different ways, whether it's bringing in speakers or programs or software or whatever the case might be. There's a lot of super interesting things that are going on in Sacramento right now. If you are not hearing our name, stay tuned, because you definitely will be. There's a lot of things that we're very proud about. And being a woman in film, I started working in film in 2001 and learned so much in a very few short amount of years. One of the things that I learned is that there is not nearly enough women working in this industry. So we have our guest interviewer tonight was actually our guest, one of the first guests that we had. I think she was the second one. And now she holds the honor of being the only repeat guest that we've had. And that's Robin Kincade with Kincade Productions. She will be joining us as we interview, she's known as the Godmother of Independent Film. The Bay Area owns her and loves her. And her name is Deb Brubaker. So welcome, Deb and Robin. Come on in. There you go.
How you doing, Lori?
I'm great. Good to see you, girls. As I said, I don't know if you caught that, Robin, but you have the distinct honor of being the only repeat guest that we've had on the webcast. So,
well, thank you. I am honored.
Welcome. Yes. So as I said, I want to talk about film. I want to talk about specifically how you each got involved from the very beginning. We've gone into that with you before, Robin, but let's hear from Deb and also supplement that. But being that you started in Sacramento and then migrated to the Bay Area, we want to hear from Deb and learn about her journey and her story. And at the same time, what lessons you've both learned and what you've done to be successful as women in the industry, what you can advise other people of. And I know that you have a ton of questions that you're going to go over specifically, but we also invite anybody who is watching online, chime in and say hi so that the girls know that you're here. And then also feel free to ask any questions and we will feed them over to them. So it's not quite as chatty as a Zoom format, but I'm kind of afraid of what a Zoom format might look like if we got 5,000 chicks all talking at the same time. So anyway, with no further ado, and my apologies if the audio is dropping out because I think Comcast is having a seizure or something today. So anyway, with no further ado, Robin and Deb. Deb, so I hear so much about you, so it's really nice to meet you finally.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
So Debbie, I want to start right out of the gate. How was your day?
Well, I can tell you why Comcast is having seizures. It's because of the show I'm doing.
Oh.
Why is that, Deb?
Well, I'm working for NBC Universal, which is owned by Comcast, and they're running 165 shows right now around the world, and it's very, very complicated. Every show is complicated, and every show is unbelievably difficult to do because of the COVID virus and doing it before there's a vaccine and having to engage all these protocols that just are so time consuming and so arduous. I mean, it's very, very complicated.
So how does it affect your average day? I mean, I know Debbie and I have been talking back and forth, and so I kind of know what she's been going through. When we produce something, the time becomes very compressed. And you don't know what you're doing at the end of it. You think, why was I? Why? But every minute is important. Debbie, tell me about how that works for you, and with COVID especially now, and producing something. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on a television series that Netflix has commissioned NBC Uni to do, and how that works is often there's multiples of production companies involved in that kind of a process. And so and that's what's going on here. I mean, there's 4 of them that I know of outside of NBC that are part of this mix. And because of that, there's communication issues, and then there's and I've been working with Australia because that's where the main body of the show gets filmed. And so what happens is that I'll start my day, maybe if I'm lucky, between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and then Australia doesn't come online till about 3 o'clock because that's their 9 a.m. And then sometimes I'm talking to the producers as early as 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they'll get up earlier just so that they can accommodate me. And then I'm working. I work do as much as I can in the morning, dealing with the local stuff. Then I'm on with the Australians until often about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And that's every day. And then I work over the weekend because there's just, and even the executives at NBC are there on the weekend. And I had a Zoom conference call with them on Sunday morning. So that's just, it's 24/7 almost. Because of the
what are the kinds of things you're doing? I know that you are legendary. I'm going to say that how I found out that Debbie Brubaker was a legend. She's just this person I met at a party, and I heard her name, but so one night we go to this comedy club, and it's one of those really cool events that the industry puts on, and people that aren't in the industry yet, or if you are in the industry, You know about these cool events, and this one was over at Little Giant Grip and Lighting, and it was a comedy night they put on, and Debbie invited me. And so we go in and everything's cool. She's like saying hello to everybody. And then the comics, and one of them was from LA, I think, right, Deb? And he says, "Oh my gosh, Debbie Brubaker's in the house. Debbie Brubaker's in the house, and she's legendary." And I'm like sitting right next to her. I made it. That's how I know Debbie's legendary. But Debbie, to be legendary, what does that mean? Is that, I know when I produce, I am solving so many problems constantly. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's that because that's what it is. It's all about solutions. I think that every project is like, I've always described every project as being like a gigantic three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle of Elvis Presley. And so you have to figure out where the piece of the ear goes and not put it in the nose. I mean, it's a very complicated process. And what happens, for example, today, I had to write a report for NBC Universal about everything that we're doing in relationship to COVID. I mean, every little detail, like how all the vans we have, what vans are dedicated to Zone A, how we're dealing with background extras, how we're dealing with, every little bit and bob of it, how everything has to be cleaned, and when it happens, and when tests are given, and when temperatures are taken, and every crew member, what zone they're in, what union they belong to, when they start work, when they're working remotely, when they're working on set. All this information has to go into this report. And it took me all day long and part of yesterday to write this report because I keep getting interrupted. The crew. I have to react to all the crew things too. Even though I try to delegate as much as I possibly can to the other people in my team, there is some of the information that only I have. And part of that problem is because I'm working remotely and we're all working remotely. If we'd all been in the same office, it'd be a whole lot easier to hand stuff off. But because they're not hearing about the stuff that's coming in, because often they'll all have big ears, right? They'll all overhear a lot of conversation, or they'll hear this or that or the other, and and it doesn't happen this way. So, I'm constantly having to bring people up to date and write emails and texts. We have Slack, we have messages, we have emails, we have phone conversations. And there's all these different forms of communication, and still, you have to stay on top of it because there's a lot of opportunity for stuff to fall through the cracks. And with a show that's this size, you have to do all the COVID testing, and some people have to do it multiple times. Like I've already done 2 tests. I have to do another one on. Trying to remember which day I'm doing my next one. It's like every 3 days I'm supposed to do a test. Well, no, it's not bad. They're easy tests. In fact, I did a video for my crew on how to do the test because they're self-tests for some of it. And then you have to go to a place at a certain point to get a test because the lab that's running Los Angeles that does the self-testing is not open on Sundays, and we can't do that. So we had to find a local lab and blah, 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 blah. It's just crazy. But I did a video on how to do the test, for my crew, and it's on Vimeo so that they can access it, and it gets the cliff notes on how to do it rather than having to read through the whole thing. I give them the important points so that they can get it done and get it into the FedEx, in a timely fashion, and that they don't leave anything out. See, because a lot of people, they're trying to wade their way through it, and they'll skip a step accidentally, and so I don't want that to happen. So I go over the big points for that. And so that's one of the things. I mean, it's a very, very complicated process, and I don't recommend it to anybody to produce anything during this period unless they have enough prep time, and that means that they have to pretty much almost double the amount of time that it takes to prepare, because it's a lot of preparation.
And Debbie, we know what you're talking about because I looked at your IMDb a long time ago, but I looked at it again, and Debbie, Anchor Baby, Sins of the Past, Flag Day, Clickbait, Silk Road. I mean, I could go on for 20 minutes on this list of movies. Quitters, Northern Lights. I mean, since 2005, you have been prodigious in your producing. You have been working all the time, it looks like to me. Tell me, how did this all begin? How did you get an interest in film? Where did that come from?
You really want to know the Wayback Machine about that, or the clip? The Wayback Machine on that is that my grandfather was a projectionist. And when I was little, and I was probably about 5 years old, and my folks would go and visit my grandparents, and then sometimes they'd want to go and visit friends and family, or mostly friends, and they didn't want a little kid tagging along with the kids, so they'd drop me or my sister off to different places, and I always wanted to stay, with my grandpa, because he was the one who had the projectors, and he had interesting mechanical things, and I was always interested in mechanical things from when I was little. So he would take me to work with him sometimes at the theater. And I know it was probably the IATSE would probably have kittens if they knew that he had a kid in the booth with him. But he taught me how the projectors ran, and then even some of my favorite movies would accidentally break, and I'd get to leave with little pieces of the film.
So Debbie and I went to a film screening in our cars the other night, and she was telling me that we were talking about The Exorcist, which I think is one of the scariest movies around.
That is it.
Debbie, tell them the story about The Exorcist.
Well, what do you mean about the fact that they put? Okay, when you're a projectionist, you learn to see frames. I mean, you're trained. I was trained when I was very little to watch for the reel changes, because every 20 minutes, and sometimes depending on how they built the film, because they had to build the film every time they get it in these reels, they'd have to build it and put it on a projector, and you'd get maybe 20 minutes out of a reel, and then you had to watch for a signal on the film to douse one projector and then put the other one on. And you learn, and you'll start to see. I mean, you really do. I got trained. I think I was a white knuckle film watcher till I was about 15 years old, because I'd been trained to watch for frames in this, and I didn't miss a reel change, for forever. I used to deliberately go to first run theaters. I mean, the first couple of days a film would show, because then it would be a clean print, and I wouldn't see the end of a reel, because the ends of the reel get dirty quicker. Now, you might not see it, and most of the audience might not see it, but I saw every bit of it. And so when I went to see The Exorcist with a friend of mine, and I must have been, I don't know, 14 or 15 years old, when it came out, and I was with a friend of mine from, junior high or high school or whatever, and I remember when I saw the first, what I call subliminal image in the film, I thought, that's when I went like, oh man, really? That's a cheap shot. And there were a few of them, and there were a few of them, and they were designed to scare people, because they were scary images, and I'm sure people didn't ever remember seeing them, and maybe they'd remember a couple days later and think that it's out of context with the film, like, why am I remembering? Oh, that's really creepy. Oh my God. Well, I saw it, and I was nudging my friend Dory, and I was like, did you see that? She said, see what? I'm like, oh man, you missed it. And every time it come up, I'd say, oh man, you missed it. And I saw them,
So I looked it up. Deb, and there are a number. I did. I looked that whole thing up, and there are a number of one frames of this devil image, and it's a certain devil, because I like devils, and it's a certain devil, and it's all through the movie. It's not just in one place. So
Really?
I sent it to you. Maybe you didn't. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember seeing it, but I remember seeing it originally. I remember I kind of got over the film right away, because I thought it was such a cheap shot. And I mean, because it was funny how, I think the first time it went by, I was like, did I really see that? And then the Second time I saw it, it was like, oh, please.
Was that the only image? Was the devil the only image? Because I don't remember any of that.
No, it's like one frame. It's like one
It
frame.
was like a white,
like-
it was like somebody wearing makeup. It was like a white, it seemed to me very, very skull-like and almost like the screen, but it was a human face, you know, and I remember it, and I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, it was ridiculous.
So Deb, how did you approach the business? You've had all this time with your grandpa. You know you like movies. What was your story of getting into the business?
Well, I made movies when I was a teenager. I had access to 16 millimeter, and I never, and then when I went to college, you know, they tried to get me to make Super 8 films, and it was like working with spaghetti. I couldn't handle it. You know, I made one film in Super 8, and it was all I could stand because I owned my own 16 millimeter equipment. So I made movies in 16 millimeter, and then I thought maybe I should go to school for this, even though I already had a pretty good handle on it. I always thought I wanted to be a director of photography, and so I went to school and I shot a lot of people's master's theses at school, even when I was an undergrad, and because I had a lot of experience as a shooter. And I graduated with a degree in cinema from San Francisco State University, and I went and I started. I didn't know what to do with myself right after I got out of school, and I needed a job because I was broke.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go to school, first of all?
I went to 3 different schools, but I ultimately landed at San Francisco State and went into their cinema program.
Okay.
And I didn't really go through their cinema program because the computer screwed up for some reason, and I was able to design my own curriculum. I was never part of their core program, and they didn't discover me until it was like they didn't discover that I wasn't part of their core program and that I was taking all these classes that I wanted to, you know, a year in. And they got really, I'll never forget, the chair of the department was really upset with me. And it was like, well, and it was, by the time they found me, I was already working in the department. I had a 16-hour-a-week job scheduling all the film equipment for everybody. The woman who hired me was the one who left because they all thought I was a graduate student, and I wasn't. But they put me in a graduate student job, and it was like I ducked through water. I knew the film equipment already. I mean, I knew all of that stuff. So I had this job, and they got mad at me, and then they said, well, you have to apply to the Corps. So I applied to the Corps, and they let me in, and then I rejected it because I already didn't. And they let me do my own thing, and I actually dragged a few other people in with me. So there's a couple people that also graduated the same way I did that were not part of the Corps, that were sort of an independent group. It was an interesting experience, you know. But I guess
when you got out of school, Deb, how did you actually start getting paid?
Well, I started teaching first, and then I also was doing working as a camera assistant, and I did a lot of work in documentaries first because one of my biggest mentors was a man named Irving Surratt, and he and his wife Allie Light made documentaries, and I worked with them, and I had the amazing privilege of doing one of their feature documentaries called In the Shadow of the Stars that won an Academy Award. And for 2 years on and off, I got to see behind the scenes of the Opera House because it was all about the San Francisco Opera Chorus, and it was still one of the most memorable experiences that I ever had. I got to help them organize it. I worked as a camera assistant, and I worked as an assistant editor on the film. And then after that, I just kept, and I kept working. I mean, I decided I had an experience as a camera assistant that was really bad once on a movie of the week. And that's where I decided that I didn't want to be a camera person anymore, that I wanted to make a difference. And the only way to do that was to do it if I was in the production department that got to help make decisions about what happened to people. And I just decided that on that one day, at the end of that one shoot, that I was going to be a production manager and never look back. And that's what I did.
Wow. Wow. Now let's go back a little bit. Let's go back. How important are those mentors? And tell me a little bit how you got that mentor. Because I think mentors, for me, they made such a huge difference in my career.
Yeah.
Explain why people need mentors and what that brings to the table.
You know, I've been really, really fortunate to have some amazing mentors. And Allie Light, you know, and her husband Irving were both mentors to me for a long time. And Allie's still with us, and Irving unfortunately has passed away. But you know, then I also had a gentleman that was in the film industry that tried to drag me kicking and screaming into the Directors Guild of America, and his name was Ned Kopp. And Ned was a really big deal in the Bay Area for a long time. He was a unit production manager and a first assistant director, and had his own production company. And you know, I learned an incredible amount from him as well. And mentors, I think, are your sort of go-to. And I you know, it's one of those things where you find yourself always feeling like you need your mentor, no matter how old you are or how far you get. It helps to have someone who has the same level of experience you do or more, usually, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can go to when the day is really rough and you go, these people are driving me, you know, flipping mad, and I really need some advice, or I need to just be able to vent to someone who's been there and done that. You know, well, you've had the brunt of that before with me. But you know, it's I think a mentor is someone who listens, someone who gives you feedback, someone who helps you, you know, navigate your way more clearly through the industry, whatever that is. You know, in any vocation, there should be mentors. You know, and I know that I've mentored and still continue to mentor quite a few people. You know, you kind of pay it forward.
Right, Lori? I'm pretty sure that's true for you too, right?
Absolutely. I think that's where you can experience things through new eyes over and over and over again, which is really cool. It's very much like being a parent.
Yes, it is.
You know?
I have a lot of children.
Now, I worked on a job with Deb, and I actually I saw her. I don't know how you have the patience, Debbie. This is that one movie that I couldn't do with you, and it was an amazing. She stuck with this director through thick and thin. I've never seen anything like this. Debbie, what is that? What is that? Is that you wanted to see the movie made? Once you take a project, you never want to let go. What is it?
That particular director was extremely difficult to work with, and I've worked with difficult directors prior to that. He wasn't the first. But I thought he had a terrific story to tell, and I thought it was an important story to tell. And so I stuck with it based on the story that he had to tell. You know, I knew that there was a pony in that pile somewhere. And I think there was, you know, I think it was a life lesson for him. And I could see that, you know, way more clearly than he could. And, you know, it was his journey, you know, and I could, you know, no matter, and a lot of the things I tried to tell him, he went in one ear, no obstruction out the other, which happens, you know, because people don't sometimes see the light when it's in front of them, you know.
No, they don't. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they're young or they're famous, because you've put some famous people in a reality check at times. Why don't you tell me that story about the staples stapled on the wrong side of the sides? Tell me that story. That's a good story.
Okay, well, I'm not going to name any names.
Oh, come on, Deb.
Come on.
All right, okay.
Come on, Deb. Nobody's watching.
Okay. All right, I'll name names. This is a good story. Okay. So I was working on a film with Rob Lowe, and he hadn't made a film in a while, you know, and I actually think he's a terrific actor, but as a person, he was a real jerk. And he, for whatever reason, was having some kind of issues. I don't think he cared for the director all that much, and I don't think he really cared for the show all that much. But he was doing it, and I'm thinking, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. But at any rate, one fine day he calls me up. Actually, I didn't get the phone call directly from him. I got it from his personal assistant. And I liked his personal assistant and couldn't figure out how the hell they ever put up with him, but that's a whole other thing. So the personal assistant calls me up and I said, hey, what's up? What can I do for you? And then that's when I think Rob grabbed the phone away from him and said, I just got my side. And there's and I've been looking around the set and the sides that everybody's got are they're stapled in the lower left hand corner. And now his sides are old man sides, which means that they are the script pages that are being shot for the day, and anything else that's not being shot has a big X in it. But his are the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and it's properly stapled in the upper left hand corner so that you can open it, and it's got a call sheet on the top. We know because we had to make old man sides for him. That's what they're called, because the sides that the crew gets, we don't do it anymore because we don't do paper, but they were half the size, so everybody would get a smaller version of it, half size version of it. And because of our copier, the way it worked, it would staple them it stapled things in the lower left hand corner, the way the sides came out, and then we'd cut them in half, and then the other ones would have to be hand stapled in the right corner. Well, he saw that there were some sides that were stapled in the lower left hand corner, and he called me up to tell me that I saw some sides and they weren't stapled correctly. He says, heads need to roll. I said, what are you talking about? He says, sides weren't stapled properly, and I think that somebody in your office really it needs to be let go, because that's just not the way things are done. And I'm trying to keep myself as calm as I can. And by this time, and he's going on, and I'm listening to him, and he's, I don't know if he was acting or what, but he was like really not happy about it. And at this point, I've got a view of the bay right outside of the Clipper building, and I can see San Francisco, and I'm on Treasure Island, and I have this lovely serene view. And I'm putting my feet up on the desk and leaning back in my chair, and I'm listening to him, and I just sort of said, well, I said, maybe you're right, and maybe, and I'm going to have to take responsibility because that's my team. And you know what? I said, maybe I just need to walk away from the show, because if you want some head to roll, then it probably should be mine, because I hired that person. And there's this pause. He goes, well, I don't think that's quite necessary. I said, you know what? You're damn right it's not necessary. Some people just need to learn how to roll with the punches. And I hung up the phone.
No!
And I hung it up on him. And I didn't realize it because I'm looking out the window that half the staff and a couple other people, the accountant and everybody, are standing behind me, and their jaws are on the floor because they figured out right away who I was talking to. And they didn't know exactly what it was about, but they heard me saying, some people just have to roll the punches. And I hit the phone down really hard. And the man
That's
never
the best. Oh my God.
The rest of the show.
Got to put your big girl pants on.
I was already wearing them that day, I think.
Oh, you wear them all the time. I'm just saying, when you're dealing with that kind of attitude, especially from sometimes celebrities, you have to stick up for your team.
And I still don't understand what his beef. I never will figure it out. I mean, he's on people's talk shows. My mother says, "Oh, he seems like such a nice guy," and I go, and maybe, and maybe he was on something. I don't know, but whatever was chewing his ass that day, he had to find an outlet, and he thought he found it in me, and he picked the wrong person.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I know, and there's lots of stories like that. I can tell you. I could tell you lots.
So Debbie, you work on movies. What other kind of stuff do you work on?
Well, a lot of times I find myself working on suspense thrillers, dramas, or sometimes kind of romantic comedies, but they always have an edge. So, I mean, some of my, I mean, I have lots of favorite films that I've worked on. So,
And what's your favorite part of working on a movie? I mean, I know a lot of times you start with the budget. Don't they come to you and you work on budget with them as a production manager? Is that true?
yeah, I mean, I write budgets often for all kinds of shows. When people need to have a budget written, for example, if they're going to try to raise money, then one of the first things they've got to have is a comprehensive budget. So I do breakdowns and budgets, and I've gotten really good at it. I have to say. I mean, I consider that one of my areas of expertise is writing budgets, and I write budgets for Amazon and for Netflix and anybody on the studio level, and I also write budgets for independent film, and I write budgets for documentaries and for commercials, and you know, so that's one, and I enjoy doing that, because then it's to me it's like a roadmap of how you're going to make the show.
So
Of course.
I have a question. I have a question because the line producing kind of budgets, here's how much it's going to take to accomplish this. Are you writing the basic production budgets, or are you going into the full on from pre-production all the way into marketing and distribution? Where does your responsibility stop when it comes?
My responsibility stops with because all the unions just want to see a production budget. They don't want to see what the marketing budget is. They don't want to see what the distributor is going to do. They don't want to see. That's not what they do. I'm working with a completely practical. I can put in development funds into the budget if they want to do that. I don't necessarily recommend it because depending on what kind of a low budget situation you want to work with, if you add some of those costs into it, it just drives your cost up. And those can often be costs that you can put aside and make part of another budget, like the budget you're talking about. You had marketing and you had distribution and you had certain elements to it that make it different. I mean, I know how to do that. That's part of a business plan.
Right.
That are usually dealing directly with pre-production, production, and post-production, and that's it. Occasionally I put in some of the marketing costs and some of the festival costs go into it. It just depends on what the plan is.
Yeah,
that's independent films.
Right.
Studio pictures don't have that in there, and studio pictures don't have contingencies like an independent film will. There's there's things that separate one from the other, and certainly and there's some advantages and disadvantages to both methods of making film. That's for sure. Independent films are great often because you don't have to answer to all kinds of crap that you would from a studio. And I'm not talking about COVID because I think that's something that everybody has to take care of. That's a really, really important point, is that independent film, just because it's independent, does not get away with not following protocols. Because I just think that it's very dangerous. And I think that people need to realize that, that if they don't follow the protocols, they run the risk of not only hurting themselves, but a lot of other people. But getting back,
I do know there was a small film here in the last month. Somebody told me 12 people on the crew and 5 in the cast, and one of the cast got COVID, and the whole crew and cast had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And somebody was asking me, well, what should I charge the production company? Because now I have to quarantine, and they did not have a COVID officer. No COVID compliance officer. And I said, well, it just depends on whether you want to ever work for that client again. I mean, I don't know how you can charge there. It's literally like the Wild West. We just don't really have, I don't know even how enforcement works on COVID, to be quite honest. Do you, Deb?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've done it.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about enforcement. Let's say you don't have a COVID officer as a production company. What are the repercussions for you on that?
Well, it's all has to do with insurance, I would imagine. I mean, I never even would conceive of doing it. So I don't, it's not, I never even, it wouldn't happen in my world.
It is
So
happening though. There are people that are doing that.
yeah, well,
We
that,
do see it.
all I can say is more fool, more fool them. That's a really irresponsible way to operate, and I wouldn't even consider it, not in a heartbeat. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the COVID safety supervisor, a COVID safety manager, a set medic, 5 COVID production assistants. The first assistant director is very well versed. I mean, I've got a certificate. I mean, I can't even imagine. And all the union people have to go through COVID training. I can't imagine doing a show and not being mindful. You know, that sounds like a Trump production. Ooh, did I say that?
Well,
Yeah.
we know in the business that it literally is from A to Z. You can have somebody come in. I'm work locations in San Francisco, or I'm a producer in San Francisco, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll make sure we have all that." And then once you get to the place, they don't have it, or they want to go more, or they want this and they want that, and you can't go there. You're not permitted to go there, and yet they want it because they're there and they have the cameras rolling and they need that shot. So, we're kind of in the same boat here in the sense of we don't know who and when COVID compliance officers are hired or not hired. And what do you see in the next year for us, Deb? What is your opinion about moving forward with production, and how is this all going to work?
Well, I think that what's happening right now, which is interesting, is that people are learning. I'm learning. I'm learning how to write this damn report I have to turn into NBC. As soon as my supervisor, I send it to the supervisor first, the COVID supervisor on my show, for him to look over so that hopefully it makes sense, because it took me all day to write it because I kept getting interrupted. And it's basically 6 pages long, font 11, single spaced. And so it's a very heady document, and I had to really cover a lot of very small details with it for the studio. And apparently every show has to do something like this. And I saw an example of one that someone who shall not be named gave me. I know that was done for a PBS television series that was going to shoot for 3 days in New York in a studio, and it was quite comprehensive and and I looked it over and I thought, oh my God, I know I'm going to end up having to do something similar for what this show is. And the thing that separates, the ability to write something like that and not do it is having a really good, solid understanding of all of the unions, how all of the unions work in tandem and exclusively, and how a production works, and how you have to, and you have to know all the moving parts. So there's probably not a whole lot of people that could write it, because from my point of view, I have to know that as a producer, as a unit production manager, but even as a line producer or someone from the top looking down, so that not just anybody, I don't think, could write something like that. So I understand why it's, it's I understand why it's difficult, and why that.
But what's it going to look like? Let's say in 4 months. Let's say in February or March of next year, we're still going to have COVID. Do you think production is going to get better at this, and we're going to see some growth in production?
No, absolutely. Because
tell me what you think.
Well, I think it's going to get better because people are going to become more educated about the whole process. I think crew members will become more educated about their tests that they have to take, and especially about self-testing and making sure that they have tests. They'll understand more about the different zones on set and what they mean, and what it means to be in zone A, what it means to be in zone B, what it means to be in zone C, and so forth. They'll understand that, they'll get used to doing all their paperwork online as opposed to sitting down with a pen and paper, because we've eliminated the paperwork. One of the crew members emailed me today or texted me today, I can't remember what mode of transportation it got to me, and asked me if he could get a computer kit fee for filling out his paperwork online. And I said, unfortunately not, because this is the way of the future and you're going to have to get used to it. I mean, that's just what it's going to be.
Step up.
Can I get a kit? Can I get a kit fee for my phone? I love it. I love it. Do you think the industry is going to be working more, less, the same? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think they're going to be working that much more because the cost of production is so exorbitantly higher because of COVID. They're going to really be cherry picking what they decide to do. And I know that, the cost of production, for some of the bigger companies like Amazon and Netflix that have been sort of spending a bit wantonly, probably Amazon more than Netflix spend more money. I think they're going to start looking at the bottom line a lot more because they're really having to throw a lot of money at it. And it makes a big difference. I mean, it makes a big difference to their bottom line. And I'm here to say that it's an enormous amount of money. And I think that the only way to get it under control, though, is to be able to figure out the processes. And we're still working on that.
Yeah.
We're still trying
it's
to
not
figure
an easy
out
fix.
the different platforms and how they can be monetized or what kind of content can go out and in what kind of way. There's so many unanswered questions that, just the exhibition of content and what the platforms can do and what they can accommodate. There's so many new things that we're all being hit with. I think it makes it more interesting, actually, because we are, there are no rules as far as that goes anymore. There is a path for just about anything, even short films, which for years had no, platform at all. So I think that's honestly kind of cool. We have a lot of comments. Somebody's recognizing, Chris Laird is recognizing that you have a sweet vinyl collection behind you, Debbie.
That's only a little bit of it.
And then let's see if we can, this question, I'm new to the industry. I'm a filmmaker, not a screenplay writer. I have a middleman on my first film to be sold to a major producer. Is it true a story by credit and partial story credit is just as good as getting paid? I don't know anything about that specific deal. Do you, girls?
Deb, I'm going to hand that right to you. I don't have credits.
I don't go as far as to say that it's as good as getting paid. There's nothing as good as getting paid.
I would agree. I
think
there's nothing like getting paid.
There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I feel like that getting paid, elevates you to being a professional, and not getting, and I know that getting paid can be important. I just think you may not have to get paid near as much if you're willing to, get a produced by credit or a story by credit. I mean, because that's a different level than just writer or producer. It's writer by or story by. Makes it personal and makes it elevates you to a different level. On the other hand, depending on the size of the project and what the project is, I think that it's important for you to get paid. I think it's important if somebody's going to want to do your story, I think that they need to pay for that privilege because you worked hard on it. I don't know any screenwriter that doesn't work hard on their stories.
Yeah.
And I feel like I think anybody who works in the industry, and should get paid. I think that when you're a student, you can work for free, and then other people work on your show for free. You do a trade-off. But I do teach a class, and I teach them that if you give them credit and you don't pay them, you have to feed them and you have to take care of them. And then and I really feel like once you enter the industry, even if you're getting minimum wage as a production assistant, you need to be paid and you need to be fed and you need to be taken care of.
Yep.
It's really true. It shows respect. It really does. And, Debbie, what about we were talking to somebody earlier, and he had a question. The question is, he knows how to edit, knows how to shoot a film. He's talented. He's started his career, but he wants to know, should he just go and just make a movie? Should he just do it? Or should he work and get paid in the industry and work his way up to finally making a movie with his team? How would you approach that situation?
It really depends on what ultimately he wants to do, if he knows. I made movies of my own for a while, and some of the movies I still make feel like mine. Some of the projects that I did, that I've done, and that I continue to do. But I did make my own films, and I always encourage people to, if they can, if they want to direct or if they want to produce, or they want to be an editor even, or a writer. I think it's a great thing to be able to produce your own project so that you get an idea about what it is to do it. It certainly is a lesson. I worked with a guy once who made a short film who was a writer, and he wanted to direct his own film, and he thought he wanted to be a director. And after going through the process of making the film, and I did a bang-up job producing it for him, I really did. And he was directing it, and I know he enjoyed it, but I also I saw that he realized that it was a way huge, incredible amount more work than he ever dreamed possible, and he dropped it like a hot potato when he was done, because he was proud of the work that he'd done, but he didn't want to ever do it again. And so it's a learning thing. If you can get together the funds to even do something really short, it's a learning thing. You get to learn, and I always am encouraging people to learn. At any stage of the game, no matter how old you are or how young you are or what it is. So I'd recommend that he make a film if he can, but I just wouldn't recommend that he try making an epic. I'd keep it short.
Yeah.
If you do short, well,
keep it short.
Yeah, keep it short and to the point. People try to
do it short. Yeah.
And some of the best short films I've ever seen are short. And when we saw those films the other night, and I thought that some of them were just terrific, really terrific. And you need to tell a story, and if you can do it right in a short period of time, you've really accomplished something. And it's always
so let me ask you. So in my mind, and I'm not a filmmaker, I just work in the business. I've never been a filmmaker, but in my mind, it seems to me that talent is talent. And if you make a short that's really good, somebody is going to see it somewhere. Irene, talent is talent. And so that's the way to get your work in front of a director or in front of a producer that says, you know what, that person, let's go talk to that person. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. It's a calling card. I think it can be a calling card. I think I have a number of things on my, in my repertoire that I would consider calling cards. Just for my producing ability, and just because I liked the way they turned out, and I thought that they looked great, and they, and sort of were a little bit of a reflection of me, because I can see my thumbprints on it, even if, and maybe a few people can, but and maybe they can't, but definitely I see it. I see my thumbprints on some of my work, so it makes me proud, and it makes me happy.
Yeah.
So
we
Deb, what is your go ahead, Lori, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, we've had a couple of shout outs, a lot of people that are saying hello. The Jennifer West, who's the Sacramento Film Commissioner, just logged on. She just got back from set. So there is something, oops, I'm dropping my mic. There is something shooting in Sacramento. Really good news. I'd love to hear that. And then Diodonis Moquette, I don't know if you guys know him. He is just an incredibly promising filmmaker who's doing all kinds of great things here locally. But he's asking if you're a writer and if you can grasp how to write an inexpensive feature, what is a good amount to try and fundraise that would be a realistic goal? Oh, that's a open-ended question. It depends on so many things.
Well, because it's really hard because it's a tough one to answer because it really depends on the genre. It depends on
Where?
who's
Who?
talented.
Uh,
Okay, this is my 2-bit answer. It's really tough often to sell stories that don't have recognizable faces in them unless you have an amazing story. I mean, look at there's Napoleon. What was there's been some movies that had nobodies in them that really did well, and there's no doubt about it. My recommendation is to keep your cast size to a minimum and write a really good solid story, and then it can be pulled off for not very much money. And as far as that money, if that dollar amount is concerned, it's what you think you can do for that much money. I mean, I made a feature film with some friends once for about $68,000 that I'm incredibly proud of. That I think it's still a good movie and I love it and I watch and whenever I've watched it, I've always thought it was really good and I've seen it a lot of times. It's about the movies you can live with, and it's about the movies that you can make for whatever amount of money you can make them for. So that it depends on your situation and who's your group. Who's the people you can work with. I know the people at Scary Cow work on each other's movies. I know that there's when I was younger and making films, I had this group of people that I worked with, the same group all the time. We had this old storefront that we had turned into a sound stage. I use the word sound loosely, that it was had a psych in it. It was called Cortland Studio up at the top of Cortland in San Francisco. And we made so many movies out of that damn stage for, like $1.98. And some of the people that I worked with then, I worked with now. I mean, one of the guys that I shot the films with, and he was, barely in his 20s. It's 30 years later, and he's now the director of photography and second unit director on the show I'm about to do. His name is Dave Scardina, and I think his work is amazing. And I love
What's the name of the movie? Somebody's asking.
That's a television series called Clickbait.
Oh no, the one that you made with your friends. Is that? I think that's the one
I've
she's.
done a whole bunch of movies with my friends. Let's see, what did we do? We did oh God, I have to think back. We did one. You're asking me when I have a very short brain power because of all the stuff I'm doing right now. We did a movie called The Understudy. We did another one called what was the name of that? I won't remember because I have too many things clogging my brain. In 2 weeks when I'm wrapped, or maybe 3 weeks I'll be wrapped in 3 weeks. And after I wrap, it takes me a few days, and I'll remember everything that I can't talk about right now.
Debbie, what's the one piece of advice you would give a new filmmaker, real quick? We got just a couple of minutes. What's the one piece of advice you would?
No limits. We can talk as long as we want.
Oh, okay, good.
I would
Good. I
say
didn't know.
the one most important takeaway from anything you do, that if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Okay? If it's not in writing, it didn't happen, and whether that's an email, whether as long as you have a record of it, it's very important. And those are the immortal words of one of my best mentors, Ned Cobb. He taught me that, earlier in my career, and I never forgot it. And I've always given that one away. I give away everything. I mean, you ask me, people give me things, I turn around and I give it all away, because you know what people will do? They'll either take all that rope and they'll hang themselves, or they'll make some great macrame.
It's so funny that you said that because I actually had a long phone conversation with a filmmaker today, and that was one of the things that I reiterated to him that I've taken away from the people that were the smartest in the business that I've worked with, is that nothing a handshake doesn't cut it in the business. No matter how hard it seems to be, because you never expect the worst to happen, that you have got to cover your ass. You've got to get it in writing. You can't go by my perception versus yours. And I think that's sometimes a hard lesson that a lot of people learn on their own. So yeah, hallelujah.
And the word assume, you know what that means.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So, and writing it down takes the ass of you and me out of it. You know.
Like that. That's very good advice, Debbie. That's very good advice. Whether you're doing a movie, whether you're being hired on for just a commercial or whatever it is, it's funny in the field, things happen and people, unless it's in writing. One time I was working literally in Modesto on a job, and I would talk, I'll go to the hotel. I'll see you guys at the hotel, because I live in San Francisco. I'm not going to drive 2 hours home and then drive back. I just, she never told me that I didn't have a hotel. She knew I was expecting a hotel. She just didn't want to confront me that they didn't have the money. When I went in to check in the hotel, they didn't have my name. They didn't have a reservation. And I confronted her there, and she says, no, you don't have a hotel. So you're expecting me to drive 2 hours home and then come back at 6 a.m. Are you out of your mind? Because it wasn't in writing. That was her excuse. Did you see that in writing? This is how it works in our business. It's just the way it works. So,
the other thing that don't be afraid to make mistakes, because everybody makes them. I think that's true more today, because the tech world says that because they make so many mistakes and they learn from them. But it's true in our business too. If you make a mistake, own it. I own my mistakes all the time, and it's not a problem. Because it's that you take responsibility for it. I run across people who won't own mistakes in this business at a very high level, and it always surprises me. But or it shouldn't, but it does. And the thing is that you learn from the mistakes. The other thing I would say to people is don't be afraid to quit a job. If you get treated like crap, or you don't like the way you're being treated, or you have somebody that's really treating you badly, and if somebody treats you bad enough to make you feel like you want to cry, you can call them on their stuff. You can definitely, I have done that, where you just say, why are you treating me so badly? Or you just, or you read a good book called The No Asshole Rule, which it's mostly for corporate, but it's a really great book to read about dealing with difficult people, which I've done that before too. Or you quit a job, and I've quit jobs before. I quit one of the highest paying jobs I ever had because the producer was such an idiot that I couldn't deal with him.
Got to be able to walk away. Got to be able to walk away.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
But one of the things
in this town again, you will work again, because you've got to be to thine own self be true. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So one of the things that I want to touch on, because you've been in the industry for a while, you've seen evolution from one end of the spectrum to where we are today. As a woman, do you feel like when you first started in the industry, the percentages were so microscopic of women that were in leadership roles? What has your experience been like, both of you, as that has evolved? I think we're seeing greater numbers now, certainly not, equality, but what kind of issues have you addressed as a woman that were unique to you feel, and where has that evolved to where we are today?
You want to go first? Robin?
Oh, you want me to answer that?
I want to hear from both of you. You both have the experience base And the time
I mean,
frame.
there's a lot more. There's more women in the industry. I'm not sure that it's. I'm sure it's somewhat different because the sexism was really bad when I got in the industry. But I was talking to this little PA the other day. This gal is trying to make it, and we're doing a workshop. And she says, "Yeah, I was on a shoot, and I went up and asked these guys if I could help, and they said, yeah, go get us some beer." And she felt this big. And she said, what do I do? And I said, well, ask him what kind of beer. Just don't let him know that that's,
Well, I want to say, what kind of beer and where's the money for it?
what kind of beer you want. Just be professional. Don't break it. And I said, and don't go up and be like, hi, how you doing? Just go up and, hey, how's it going, man? You know, that's the one of the advices I could give women. It's hard. I still see it to this day, the sexism.
Well, you know, and then people don't do themselves any favors sometimes. I'll never forget being on a show where a woman came in, and I don't know which department she was in. She was hired as a PA by the costume department or whatever. And she was wearing some short shorts and a tube top, and she wasn't small up top, and she was wearing these sandals with heels, and open-toed sandals with heels on a set that was not safe. And she walks into the door, and I took one look at her, and I said, "You're not dressed appropriately for this job." And she says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, first of all, you have open-toed sandals and heels, and if those heels get stuck in the steps going into a trailer because they have that corrugated metal stuff," I said, "you're going to get hurt." I said, "Not only that, but you probably should be wearing jeans and a t-shirt and a pair of tennis shoes or a pair of, leather shoes." And I said, "So I would like for you to go home and change your clothes and come back to work if that's what you want to do." She never came back.
What was her job? What was she hired for?
I think she was as a production assistant in the costume department, but it doesn't matter.
Right. No, yeah.
Appropriately for the job, and she wasn't. So you have to bring to the job with you, like Robin has said, and like I told my students, a good attitude. But you also have to be professional. And you can't dress like you're going to go out to the local bar with your buddies, men or women. Men can't come to work with torn T-shirts that say nasty things across the front. You have to be clean and you have to be professional, and you don't want to be remembered for negative things. You really don't. If you can help,
show respect.
Yeah,
it's really about showing respect. Respect for the team.
Yeah, never let them smell.
We work in teams and we respect the team. So Debbie was talking earlier about making mistakes. One of the reasons I like to work in a team is we catch each other's mistakes a lot.
Yeah.
And you cannot do this job. There's so many things coming at you, especially when you're producing without a team.
That working remotely is really difficult because you don't have your team to catch you when you make a mistake. And I have so inundated, and I can't stay on much longer because I'm seeing emails coming in over the wire, and I probably have about 35 or 40 of them, and I've got to go address them. I apologize, but I can't stay on too much longer.
Okay, we can start wrapping it up. Let me see if there's any other questions in our. We posted the asshole rule civilized workshop. Jason, I don't know if you have an answer to this question either. It's Jason Sanger. What do you do if you have a contract with the producer and he doesn't pay you? I'm only assuming that the contract is as a.
Oh, don't get me started on that one. You know what? I've had issues before with producers and not getting paid, and that's when I engaged an entertainment attorney. It's worth every nickel. Usually, most of them will consult with you for free, and if they think you have a thing, if you have a beef and it's real, they'll go after them for you, and you have to share some of the funds with them. But that's better than getting nothing. So I would definitely. Often all it takes is a letter from them with their letterhead saying, "Cough it up, baby," or "You're busted," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I'd love to know if you have any references to entertainment attorneys that you've worked with film.
Oh.
I get asked that question all the time, and we have a real shortage here in the Sacramento region. That's one of the areas I'd love to see supplemented. But yeah,
the Bay Area has several good ones too, and Los Angeles certainly has some good ones. And so it doesn't matter where they live these days. We all work remotely, including the attorneys. So
I know that's so true.
Yeah.
So why are you chicks staying in San Francisco?
well, I live here. You know, I mean,
I love
lived
it here.
here for decades.
Yeah.
So this is my home. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in leaving. Although I did talk to a friend of mine who does producing in Australia today on the phone that I like, and I adore the producer I'm working with now, who's now in the East Bay. I saw him. He came into town yesterday, and I got to see him, and I needed I needed a fix. I needed to see the guy because I really love working with him, and he and this other fellow that I met on this show. I really adore them, and I was telling Brendan, the producer in Australia, that I'm ready to get up and get on a plane because he was working in Queensland, and he said there's only 2 cases of COVID in the whole area, and that's it.
I want to live there. Yeah.
And then another place that he was, I forget where it was, part of Australia, only had like 2 or 3 cases, and it wasn't even prevalent. You don't know it's even happening.
Wow.
And I said, that's why I want to be.
Yeah. I let's all go. Let's all go. I think we can
follow the protocol.
plan that for sometime right after the beginning of November. We can escape a whole lot of craziness.
We won't be working.
A whole lot of craziness
after the beginning of November. Not here anyway. I think it's going to slow way down after, right about then before Thanksgiving, and then and not until spring will it pick up a lot because it's just going to be too hard to work in the winter. It really is.
Yeah, that's pretty typical, when we see things slow down at that time of year. But it feels like we've just started ramping up.
We'll see. I mean, I've been working year round for a while now, and the seasonal part of it went away for me for several years. So I didn't have seasons. I was surprised. It was never more. Nobody's more surprised about it than me because I knew it was being seasonal. It wasn't. I was working all year round, and now I'm thinking it's going to be back to seasonal, mostly because of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're all going to hang in there. We are.
Yeah.
We are. And, honestly, I think the whole point that I wanted to show with having the both of you here tonight is that, there's a lot of strength in females being on production, on set. There's a lot of strength in having women on your team. One of the first shorts that I shot, we decided that we wanted to see if we could do it with just an all-woman crew. And we weren't even sure that we could find all the right positions, and we did, and we produced it. And it was, at that time, unheard of. There wasn't anything that even existed that was an all-woman crew. So I love that it's become that it's not the big deal that it was at one time. I do want to see more women in leadership roles. Whether it's as, producers or directors. And I do want to, and I've mentioned this to Robin, our focus is to grow in Sacramento, but also to integrate and grow together with the everyone in the North Bay. You're our sisters to the Bay Area. We should be able to vacillate back and forth for, hey, what do you know about this? Do you have a lead on this? How can you help me here? I want to expand our reach outside of this, Sacramento Valley region to, the Bay Area. And as you just said, we all are working from home. So there is no geographic boundaries really anymore that lock us in. I just want to make sure that great people get a chance to work with great people. And, you know, knowing that you guys don't have a shitstorm of stories about how awful, you know, it is for you today. I see that you both have opportunities to grow and to mentor, even more importantly. So that just makes my heart happy, to know that this is the kind of, you know, path that we're forging for the young filmmakers that are going to be coming after us. So I want to thank you guys for coming on board. We could talk forever, but you know, Debbie's busy. No, I dig.
It's always that
I
way.
dig what you're doing. I want to hear. I want to hear more about that, and we'll definitely not have the last conversation. And as soon as everything is, you know, open up on some kind of a physical level, we got to plan a really big gathering, because it's been great seeing everybody virtually, but now I want to hug you and talk to you in person. So girl power, film power,
Girl power.
You know, thank you again for both of you coming on board. We're gonna end the show now. Hang on, girls, because I'm gonna just give everybody a reminder that coming up on November 10th, we have a webcast with filmmaker Perry King and the Placer County Film Commissioner Beverly Lewis. And he has had his own lessons in going from being a leading man actor for his whole career to now driving a film production from beginning to fruition. So stay on hand for that. Coming up on November 10th. Up until that point, we'll let you know if anything exciting comes up. Thank you, girls, so much. It was really good to see you. Always fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Lori.
Deb, you're in the pack now.
I love it. Thank you.
All right, you guys
Thanks
take
a lot,
care.
Lori, for everything. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.